Hey there, everybody. How's everybody doing? I am here and live on Facebook. It's always, sorry, not Facebook, YouTube. YouTube's going to hate me for that one. Um, it's always weird when you first get here the first couple of moments because you never know if anybody is actually there or if anybody can see you. Because when I first come here, it shows as like, a couple of people here. And then all of a sudden, there will be, like tons and tons of people. So I'm just going to kind of, rant and rave here for a couple of moments just to make sure that people get here and know that I'm on here. There we go. Now people are beginning to pop in. Now people are here. Okay. Is anybody else having a hard time with the video? Because somebody said no video. So if anybody, can everybody tell me if they can see me and hear me? I'm seeing lots of hellos. So, if you can let me know if you can see me and hear me, that would be great. Video. Okay, one person says video isn't visible. Is anybody else having a hard time with the video? Can you please let me know? Because I need to know before we move on. Seeing lots of hellos, so thank you for your hellos. Okay, so the person who says that they cannot see me, it's likely because of your own end. So if you can disconnect to it and reconnect again, you should be fine. Okay. All right, great. Thank you. The person seems to have it resolved. All right, so I hadn't done one of these in a while, so I thought I would have a question and answer session. Please pardon the headgear here. It keeps me from having to talk super loudly, which after a while of talking so loud, you end up kind of losing your voice, and that's not pleasant, trust me, which is why I, kind of hold on to all these cough drops that like you see here because they become a necessity. Okay, so let's kind of lay down the rules of the road. We're not here to do answers about people's horoscopes. Okay, because I know when I do question and answer session, it easily gets misinterpreted to be about somebody's horoscope. I did a post on my Facebook page some weeks ago. If you come onto YouTube and you ask people for predictions based upon one planetary placement in your horoscope, it's kind of like, choosing fast food over a gourmet meal or a beat up secondhand car over a Rolls Royce, or like going in to see a doctor and asking the doctor to tell you what you've got without ever letting them examine you. Because you can't really see too many things about an individual just from one thing. And those things that you do come up with in those particular instances are usually like semi accurate. And then the person goes off believing all those things about themselves that really, are not true, and it doesn't serve anybody. So that's why I generally tend to steer away from those things here. But any general astrological questions which you might have and that you want to ask here are completely open. Okay. So somebody's asking, I don't have a single friend in my life. Well, I'm sorry you don't have a friend. I really am sorry you don't have a friend. I can't tell you why that is, because I would need to look at your entire horoscope. So let's have some general questions here. Okay, here's one. Okay, so I'm going to copy and paste your question, because generally what ends up happening is I start addressing one particular question and then there are like 5 or 6 other ones. Okay. I have to kind of handle them one at a time. So I'm going to open up a new text document here and I'll paste it here. Somebody asked me about combustion of planets and how it affects the Mahadashas. Let's handle that side of it first. Okay. So when a planet is here you go. Here's the sun, right? Or actually, no, this is a better representation of the sun. This smoothie bottle is the sun. This glasses cleaner is the combust planet. So, and this is the Earth. So here's the Earth, here's the sun, right? So when you have a combust planet, here's the sun, here's the Earth. The planet that's combust is behind the sun. So because that planet is behind the sun, its rays can't get to the earth, right? So it's like being aware that something might be there, but not being able to connect to it. Equally, there is a difficulty in relating to that planet that's behind the sun. And it's almost as if the individual has an incompatibility with whatever that planet represents, almost like having an allergy to it, because they can't connect to the rays from that planet. Those rays get disrupted. And so those things generally tend to be out of alignment in the individual's life. They tend to be disrupted, or the individual just basically has a general incompatibility with those things. Let's say that planet represents relationships and career for the individual. Then the individual, can end up having a difficult time feeling comfortable with work, or a difficult time feeling comfortable with relationships, because that planet that signifies relationships and career is being disrupted in its capability to reach the earth so that the individual can relate to it properly. So when you're in the Mahadasha of a combust planet, basically all those issues will come to the surface, whatever they represent. But if you understand, those issues are going to be different in every single Varga chart. So you have your Rashi chart, which is going to be a representation of the main impediment that that planet represents, right? But let's say, for instance, that planet happens to rule the 6th and the 9th in your Dashamsha chart. That can be you may have some difficulty with work ethics. You may have some difficulties feeling the capacity to work hard towards your success. And so it's going to be different in every single Varga chart based upon that. That's so when there are multiple combust planets in the same house, the combust planets generally are going to disrupt the areas that those planets rule, more so than the house that they're in. That's the main area to look at, is the areas of the chart that those planets rule. Okay, so let's see what else we've got here. I'm going to go into another question. Before I go into another question, just so everybody knows, as you are likely aware, I had 2 courses start recently. One was a fundamentals course, which the registration to that course is now closed. But I'm also doing a nakshatra course, an extensive nakshatra course that's going to run through until early next year. Registration is still open on that course until this weekend. And if you'd like to register, you can visit my website, AuthenticAstrology.com, go to the courses page, and there will be a link there for the nakshatra course. And if you click on that, if you go to register, and you can register either by trimester or payment in full, when you go to register, enter the code, all uppercase letters, prorata, which is PRORATA. That's PRORATA, in order to get the price reduced for the first 2 classes that you've missed. Even though you've missed 2 classes, all classes are recorded, so you can catch up with the first 2 recordings. Okay, let's take another question. Let's see what they have. Okay, I'm just going to scroll through, so if I'm quiet, then that's why I'm quiet. Okay, just a reminder, I'm not here to answer questions about your own personal horoscope. That is not really possible to do in an accurate manner unless you're looking at the full horoscope. And I don't want to give you general assumptions about your chart, because that's not a service to you. And it's not really good astrology, so to speak. Okay, let's see. So somebody has asked, from which house in the horoscope can we see our pet's health? That's a good question. Okay, so I'm going to go to that one, right? Let me just bring that question back up again. There we go. So basically, pets are generally considered extended family. Okay, so that would relate to the sixth house. Sixth house rules pets. So in order to understand a pet's health, you would want to look at the sixth house from the sixth house or the 11th. Another thing you can do is you can look at the Nati Karaka, which would be representative of that as well. And that would also be able to show you the pet's health if you looked at the sixth from the Nati Karaka. That's just a general thing. Okay. Somebody's asking a good question. I'm going to go into this, right? And so, pardon me, I'm copying and pasting questions as I get to them. How important on our varas, like Friday is ruled by Venus, and how it affects the native? Well, it gives a general overall tone to the day. So Friday will have some Venusian influence to it, right? That's why we begin to feel on Fridays, most especially if we don't work on the weekends, like it's time to kick back. And usually, even if we do work on the weekends, we're connecting with other individuals who aren't working on the weekends. So it tends to be the same way. Jupiter will have a certain tone of expansion. So the real question was, how important are all of these things? They're really meant to be taken in conjunction with several other factors in the Panchanga, like the Tithi and the Karana and the Yoga and the Nakshatra. They're all meant to be taken together. And a lot depends, like if you're looking at the Vara and it's Friday and you're looking at Venus, as to the well being of Venus at that particular time is going to determine on some levels the well-being of the day, but you have to take it in collaboration with a lot of the other panchanga factors. And maybe at some point in the future, I will teach a class on the panchanga and how I work with it. Okay. Exalted Sun and exalted Saturn, mutual aspect. All I have to kind of say things this way, right? Just so people understand. And so everything in astrology has to be qualified. And I don't mean necessarily in terms of the quality of the planet. Basically, what I do mean is that you have to take into consideration all the other different factors that are influencing. Okay, so if Saturn and the Sun are forming a mutual aspect to each other, that can create a lot of power for the individual if other factors in the horoscope support that. It can create a lot of focus for the individual. It can create a lot of determination. And the individual will likely strive to be very considerate of their ego and their pride because Saturn will help to curb that. And where Saturn goes into its darkness, even though if it's an exalted Saturn, it's going to have a certain degree of that because it's Saturn. The sun will shine the light on things that are that Saturn's getting kind of stuck on and help to break Saturn out of that stuck energy. But that's just a general way to understand it. So, one more announcement for those of you who are interested in scheduling an astrological consultation with me. I am presently offering a 10% discount on all astrological services for a limited time only. This is preceding a rate increase, which is going to take place on the 15th of April. All of my consultations are now being done person to person over the internet. So for a limited time, you can schedule a consultation with me at a 10% discount off of the normal price and have that consultation done person to person over the internet. And there still are some spaces available this month if you're interested in scheduling. Okay, I'll repeat that a little bit later on. Okay. How to see timing of graduation. Well, number one, it's not just one factor that would show you that. You have to take into consideration a couple of different Varga charts. Basically, The fourth house ends up being very deeply tied in to things like degrees and diplomas and things like that. But you don't want to just look at the Rashi chart. Okay, so fourth house factors. What does that mean? So that means, the fourth house getting activated by, its Dasha or Antardasha or Prachantardasha, whatever the case may be. It can also mean the Mercury, if Mercury is in the fourth or Jupiter's in the fourth and you're in Mercury or Jupiter Dasha, that can help to activate the fourth too, because Mercury and Jupiter have manifesting strength, especially the stronger their strength is in that particular chart. The fourth from Jupiter or the fourth from Venus, because both of those planets have a connection to education, as well as the fourth from the Putra Karaka, can also be factors that can bring things into the equation with that in terms of graduation. And equally looking at the Sadamsha chart, which is the 24th divisional chart, and looking for those very same factors can also be something that activates the graduation. But you don't want to just look at the Rashi chart, because you may get inconsistency if you do that. Okay. How to know which deity to worship according to horoscope. That is a long-winded technique. I probably couldn't teach it all to you here. But basically what you're doing, I can give you the general side of it, but general is sometimes a little bit dangerous, I should say. In the Rashi chart, the Navamsha chart, and the Chaturvimshamsha chart, or the Sadamsha chart, as I just said a moment ago. Those are both one and the same, 24th divisional chart. You want to find the Atma Karaka, and you want to look at the 12th from the Atma Karaka, okay? And if you're looking at an odd sign, the 12th would be in its normal position. If you're looking at an even sign, then the 12th is going to be the sign in front of it rather than the one behind it, because even signs work differently. And you look at and see what comes up when you're looking at the 12th from that position in the Rashi, Navamsha, and the 24th divisional chart. And when you look at that, you want to see if there's a planet in that position. In each of those, you're looking for the strongest of the planets. Okay. And then, as a general rule, like Sun represents Shiva, Venus represents Lakshmi, so on and so forth. But it's a little more long-winded than that. So teaching that technique in a brief, 2-minute sentence in a YouTube video is not really the best thing. But there are a lot of different factors that you have to take into consideration for that. Okay. What is the path of a native who has the Lagna in Anuradha nakshatra? Well, a lot of that would depend upon Saturn, the well-being of Saturn, the influences to Saturn, and the what nakshatra Saturn's in, and following things along that chain. So it's a little more complex than just giving you a simple answer. So if this is about your own particular horoscope, I wouldn't, believe tons of these things about yourself. But Anuradha nakshatra can bring devotion to the forefront. The individual can be very devoted. If they've got a strong Saturn, they can be devoted to the appropriate things in their life because they've got good, strong judgment in that capacity. When Saturn's weak, there can be the propensity to having weak boundary issues, which don't necessarily help the individual. So a lot of it depends upon the well-being of Saturn and all of the other influences, such as the nakshatra Saturn's in, where the dispositor of that nakshatra is, so on and so forth. And all these things have to be taken together in order to really understand the full path of the individual in relation to that. Okay, let's see what else we've got. So I'm not going to go too deeply into yoga questions. Here is the reason why, because yogas have to be quantified and qualified, right? Because basically, you can have a yoga in a chart that never bears its fruit because the planets are too weak and they're doing more harm in the horoscope than they are help. And vice versa, like if you've got a bad yoga in your chart or a difficult yoga and the planets are doing more benefit in the horoscope than they are difficulty, then that yoga will hardly be felt. So yogas are not meant to be taken as an isolated factor, but instead their strength is meant to be qualified and quantified. And I mean both of those. Qualified is their strength here, first of all, and if that strength is there, what is the quantity of that strength? Okay. Critical houses in the D2 chart. That would be the second house, the third house, and the fourth house. Okay. The Hora chart is about our capacity to have our needs fulfilled. So the second house is very important to that because it relates to wealth in general, but it also relates to resources. Chief among those resources, aside from finances, is also family and friends. The third house is important because that determines the level of courage and effort that we'll put forward towards achieving our needs and fulfilling our needs. The fourth house is important because that means the general overall happiness that we're going to have with our needs being fulfilled and met. And the well being of the moon is also very important. Okay. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, something I want to speak to here, which is life is, or I should say astrology, not life, but life too, is seldom as simple as just the Rashi chart. Okay, so when we first learn astrology, we get very deeply into the Rashi chart because that's the one that we understand the purpose about. We generally next become very acquainted with the Navamsha chart because we understand the deeper meaning of that. But all of the Varga charts are meant to be used. So it's hard to understand things like combinations in a chart required to meet an enlightened person and things like that just based upon the Rashi chart. There are so many different factors that have to be taken into consideration, right? And sometimes you might think it's going to be here in the Rashi chart. You might think it's going to be in the Navamsha chart, when in actuality, it might be in the Vimshamsha chart, the 20th divisional chart. So you have to kind of take all these things into consideration. It might even be in the Shastyamsha chart that you see that potential. Okay. So there are so many different things you have to look at in order to really understand a horoscope along those lines. So again, just to kind of repeat and do my shameless and blatant self-promotion, for those of you who are interested in scheduling a consultation with me, and this isn't really self-promotion, this is a gift to you really, for being so dedicated in terms of following my channel and bringing me to the point in my career that I'm at now, for which I'm very grateful. If you're interested in scheduling a consultation with me, you can schedule person to person with me now at a 10% discount on all of my astrological services. That's going to be taking place for a limited time. I'm not going to say how many days yet because it depends on how full my schedule becomes with that as to when I will shut that off. Also, the nakshatra course registration is still open, but it will close after this weekend. And you can register either by trimester or by payment in full. Okay, let's take some more questions after I have a drink. Eleventh house in D2 Hora chart isn't important. It's a secondary house. The reason being is even in the Chaturtamsha chart, which is more about fixed assets, the fourth house is more important than the 11th because the fourth house shows the portion of fortune that you can have, right? So let's put it this way. If you had a really strong 11th house in your Chaturtamsha chart, which Hora chart is about liquid assets, Chaturtamsha chart is about fixed assets. So sure, you want to look at the 11th in those, but it isn't the critical. It isn't critical. Because here's the thing. If you're looking at the Chaturtamsha chart and you're looking at the 11th, that shows the amount of fortune that you would like to have, because the 11th is a kama house. It's a desire house. These are my aspirations. This is the type of money I would like to have. So you could have a strong 11th lord, which would give you on a certain level, right, the recognition and fulfillment of your desires in terms of the amount of income you would like to have. But if your fourth lord is weak, that means you're not going to be content with that. So the fourth house is much more important because it gives contentment with what you have. If you have a strong fourth lord in the Chaturtamsha, it's not going to matter if your 11th house is weak and you have little income, because you'll be secure and comfortable with the amount of fortune you have. Right? And it's the same thing with the Hora chart. The Hora chart's about getting your needs met. So if the second is strong there, your needs will be met. If the fourth is strong, you'll be happy and content and secure with your needs being met. If the 11th is strong and all those areas are weak, you might have a lot of income, but you're wasting it on things. So, the thing is it's the 11th isn't as important as the second and fourth in those charts. Okay. So let's see what else we've got here. So if I'm quiet, I'm just reading through questions. I know it makes for boring viewing, but I have to read through questions before I can answer them. And I have to kind of understand what somebody's really asking. Okay. You're welcome. Somebody's saying thank you for sparing time. Yes, you're welcome. So somebody else says, what's the topic here? General topics, as long as they're not about your own particular horoscope. Okay. I'm probably not going to go too deeply into the question of Vargottama ascendants in birth and Navamsha mean with respect to results. It can give a strong connection, potentially, he says, to living a meaningful and purposeful life, because the Navamsha is about our capacity to find meaning in those things in our life. That's why it's connected to marriage, which hopefully we find meaning in, even if that meaning is that we don't want to be in the marriage anymore. Okay. But basically, Vargottama ascendants in the birth and Navamsha chart can mean a good capacity to find meaning with one's individual life path if those planets are strong, right? Because you can have a Vargottama ascendant, and the Lord of the ascendant can be weak in one of those Varga charts. It's not going to be as strong then, right? So you have to take all of these things with consideration in order to integrate them. Somebody has asked the $1 million pound rupee, whatever your economy is, question, okay, which is how to grow with Rahu Mahadasha. With Rahu, the problem is individuals like to feel that they can control Rahu Dasha. The number one thing that happens to you as an astrologer is you get people flocking to you during their Rahu Mahadasha, wanting to know what it's all about. And then they have this tendency to think that once they understand what it's about and they apply themselves in that direction, that everything will just become a bowl of cherries with whipped cream on top and everything is absolutely wonderful and perfect. No. So let's dispel that illusion. What will happen if you know all of those things is beneficial, because what will happen if you know what your Rahu Dasha is about is it will take you through deeper and deeper and deeper layers and really take all of the cosmic and karmic garbage that you've got stored inside your psyche and purify it. And ultimately, that's what you want anyway. Okay? But with Rahu Dasha, you don't control Rahu Dasha. You just go along for the ride and do your best to learn and to stay centered. That's how you grow with Rahu Dasha. You don't try to control it, because the moment you try to control it and go, oh, Rahu Dasha is wanting me to do this, and so then you'll focus in that particular direction, and then it will show you, let's say Rahu's associated with the fifth house, and you're going, oh, Rahu Dasha wants me to focus on my children, and it will carry you in that particular direction. And then it'll bring up all sorts of confrontation with Dharma and how you're expressing yourself along your Dharmic path. And because you think you've got it all sorted out and that it's dealing with children, it will take you in that direction. So you'll go, I need to really focus on my Dharma. And the next thing you know, you're having all sorts of gambling issues because it's bringing up all the speculative aspects, right? That's how Rahu Dasha works. So you just go along for the ride. That's an easier thing to do, is to just go along for the ride rather than trying to control it. Okay. For relocation, which chart is important? If you're asking where to relocate to, there is a specific technique that's based upon declination of the planets that tends to work best. Okay. But you also want to look and see if the issue that the individual's having is really more internal, and that's why they're wanting to relocate, or if it's actually external. And for that, you can look at the Rashi chart and the Chaturtamsha chart. Okay, so just a reminder, a 10% discount on all astrological consultations. If you go to schedule, just enter on the services page the discount code when you go to make payment, which is April. I didn't say that before. All uppercase letters APRIL will give you your 10% discount. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Somebody has asked a question which it seems like an incomplete question, and I'm not fully sure of the question, which is how to use house cusps with transits and will it work with Campanus house system? Maybe you can explain your question a little bit more. And if I happen to see it, I will definitely get along and answer it. But sometimes they scroll so quickly down the screen that I've lost it. Okay. So let's see what else we've got here. Okay. So I'm just scrolling up and down here to see what we've got here. So somebody asked a good question. What karmas contribute to mental agony and mental disease? Well, I'm not going to go into yogas that indicate mental illness in a horoscope, but things that can create difficult mental issues for an individual in general can be connections between Ketu and Mercury and Rahu and Mercury, or Ketu and Rahu to the third house, because it can bring up all sorts of doubts and insecurity in regards to one's intelligence. Equally, Rahu connected to the first house can make some difficulties for the individual in integrating things, because basically the first house also relates to the head. So first house issues, third house issues, things along those lines. Rahu and Ketu connections with those. A disgruntled Mars, right? Like Mars and poor dignity in one of those houses can make for a lot of mental agony as well. A Mercury that's debilitated with Mars, perhaps in Gemini in the third, is another thing that can create that. So many different factors. Spiritual evolution is the most important thing, most definitely. Yeah, somebody has asked this question before. Somebody said significance of K2 aspected or conjunct both fifth and ninth lords in D1, D9, and Den and D10 charts. A lot of that really depends on the dispositor of K2 and its placement from K2 and its placement from the ascendant in all of those particular horoscopes, all those particular Vargas rather, and the well-being of the dispositor. Okay, so that's why I'm not going into that question, because it's a very general and vague questions that make it vague question, which isn't a criticism. I'm just letting you know it's difficult for me to make a comment on that, because I like making accurate comments and I don't have enough information there to make an accurate comment. And even if you gave me all that information, it would be too complex for me to kind of pick out of your words without actually having the chart in front of me, because the chart actually makes it easier to see it. Okay. So let's see what else we've got. Okay. What is, okay, let's see. There are generally no sure shot methods for anything in astrology based that I could teach you in like 2 minutes, right? Doesn't work that way. So somebody's saying how to judge amount of spiritual growth and evolution in this life from birth chart. Any sure shot method? No, there's no simple method. It's several different things put together and showing confluence in the horoscope that tends to indicate those particular things. Okay. What does K2 in the first house mean? K2 in the first house people have this tendency to be very self-controlled, and not only self-controlled, because Rahu's in the seventh, their focus is going to be on other people whilst they themselves are being self-controlled. And because of that, there is a tendency to think that everybody else is watching them to see if they're going to get out of control or if they're going to be able to maintain a sense of control. So it makes it very difficult for those people to feel comfortable within relationships. And there can be a sense of perfectionism in regards to that self control, especially if K2 is in Virgo. If that's with a debilitated Mercury, that can make it even harder. The individual may struggle to feel okay with themselves, right? If they have a good solid Mercury, they'll be very self controlled and very detail oriented in regards to their self control. But really, there ends up being relationship problems for individuals with K2 in the first house because there's a need for them to be able to feel like they can relax into relationships, which is not something that generally comes very easy for them. Okay. Let's see what else we've got. I would not just use chakras associated with houses in a birth chart in order to judge the evolution of an individual. That's just too simple a concept. You're going to find the further you get into astrology that there are no simple magical formulas like cookbook astrology, which a lot of people like those cookbook techniques because cookbook techniques are good in terms of they get you thinking astrologically, but they're not the be all and end all. So I'm afraid to tell you that there are no simple 1-2 planet combinations that automatically say you're going to be very spiritually evolved, right? It just doesn't work that way. You have to take the entire horoscope into account. Okay. So somebody says, what if about if Ketu is the strongest planet in the chart and dignified? What are you using to judge the strength of that Ketu? That would be the question that I would ask you back. Okay, because a lot of people like to use the analogy that Ketu can be exalted in Scorpio and Rahu can be exalted in Taurus. Whilst they can function very well in those signs because of the areas of the chart that that's connected to. If you've got a weak Venus, that's not going to be positive. And if you've got a weak Mars, it's not going to be positive, right? So K2 may not be the strongest planet in the chart just because it's in Scorpio. If Mars is weak, that's not going to make a difference. So you really have to, at least in my opinion, okay? And since you're asking my opinion, I'll tell you my opinion. Okay. Well, let's see some of the other questions that we've got. I can probably go another 10, 15 minutes for people. So what is the effect of 4 planets in the 11th house, Sun, Mercury, Rahu, and Venus? I'm just going to give you some simple things here. So if this is about your horoscope, please don't think that this is, about you. You're just asking a question about these 4 planet combinations. So I'm going to give you something simple in association with that. Okay. The 11th house relates to our capacity to feel comfortable within the group of people that we're connected with, to feel comfortable with our peers, to feel comfortable with the collected. How does that tie into income, you might ask? Well, the 11th house is also validation. And so we quite often are looking for validation in terms of the amount of income that we have. Income really is just a level of validation. So when you have Rahu connecting to Mercury, there can be doubts in regards to yourself in contrast to other people. When you have Rahu connecting to the sun, there's an identity crisis, which can force the individual to identify with the crowd rather than identifying with their own independent self-interest. And with Rahu connecting to Venus, as a result of that, they may have very high expectations, both of themselves and of the other people in their lives. And this leads to very high expectations, very high desires that can't necessarily be fulfilled. And then the individual can grow a tendency to doubt their intelligence because of their lack to be able to fulfill those levels of aspirations that they're trying to fulfill, and they begin to suffer an identity crisis because of the connection with Rahu and the sun. Okay, that's just a simple way of understanding it. Okay, what does Ketu in Revati mean? Well, first of all, let me just remind everybody, just briefly again, that my nakshatra course is still open for registration. If you want to learn a little bit more about the nakshatras and how they work, and even especially the nakshatras of your nodes, you can still register for that course. That course is now prorated with the first 2 classes discounted. If you go to register either by trimester or payment in full, there's a discount code, prorata, Prorata, all uppercase letters. Registering by trimester is somewhere around $200-300, and then the next payment wouldn't be due until June or July. So Ketu in Revati. Revati is a soft, friendly, gentle nakshatra, right? But at the same time, it's a Jiva nakshatra. And with Jiva nakshatras, it's a case of being assertive because Jiva relates to the animal kingdom. And in the animal kingdom, it's either dominate or submit. Okay, lead or follow. It's about survival of the fittest, right? So when you have this soft, friendly planet that feels on a certain level as if its gentleness is being threatened, then it may become more assertive, or it may submit to the individual that is touching upon those sensitivities. Revati is also a very caring and nurturing nakshatra. So the person may want to nurture that person who they feel is stronger than them, or they may want to assert themselves strongly in order to take care of others. An interesting way of looking at that is you can see a lot of people with Ketu and Revati as being these individuals who really care for humanity or care about other people, but yet when they see people being injured, insulted, being given a hard time, they will become very assertive in terms of how to take care of those people. And if they're working in harmony with other people involved in that particular scenario, they may feel as if others are not working as hard to protect others. And that's just because they have a natural capacity for caring, whereas other people may not necessarily have that capacity, because Ketu also represents our skills, those things that we're very familiar with. Okay. So let's see some other questions here. Just how spiritual is the planet Saturn? All the planets are spiritual. So that's kind of a difficult question to answer, right? Because all planets are spiritual. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Why doesn't Ketu conjunct the sun always mean an enlightened soul? All right, so that's a 2-part question that we're going to answer. What is enlightenment? Okay, since you're asking me a question, you're asking my opinion, so I'm going to give you an answer as per my opinion. We're all enlightened. We're just not all aware of it. So awareness and enlightenment are 2 different things. Each individual is enlightened, but not each individual is self-aware enough to recognize that they're enlightened, right? So it's when we have that awareness to recognize the enlightenment that we become quote unquote enlightened. Why doesn't Ketu conjunct the sun always mean an enlightened soul? Because Ketu conjuncting the sun can also mean a tendency to feel that one is never perfect enough, that one is never sacrificing enough, that one is never good enough. And so in order to reach that point of self-awareness, you also have to honor the soul, right? If you're always wanting to be the most humble person in the universe, that also is a pride issue. Okay, so there can be humility with Ketu conjuncting the sun, but there can be pride about that humility. Basically, lack of self-worth is also a form of pride because it's demeaning the gifts that God gave you. So Ketu conjuncting the sun doesn't always mean an enlightened soul, because it depends on the well-being of that sun, other influencing factors in the horoscope. So many different things. Okay. All right. So let's see what else we've got here. So again, just a reminder while I'm reading, 10% discount on all astrological services. If you enter the discount code April, APRIL, all uppercase on my astrological services page. So all uppercase letters, APRIL, and you can schedule a person-to-person consultation with me at a 10% discount for a limited time. And I am doing a rate increase soon. So I would recommend taking advantage of that while you have an opportunity. Okay. Somebody saying Mercury relates to skills, right? My Mercury is in Pisces in Revati, but I have a lot of talents. How is that? Well, first of all, Mercury is not debilitated in the entire sign of Pisces. In addition to that, having a Mercury that functions on a more intuitive level is also a gift and also a skill. And in addition to that, the third house is also skills, in addition to looking at the strength of the Karaka. So there are so many different factors you have to take into consideration. And I would say that modesty is also your skill. Okay. Because you acknowledge your skills. And that's a good thing. All right. Let's see what else we've got here. Papa Kartari yoga is when you have a malefic on either side of the ascendant. Most especially, that's the main form of Papa Kartari yoga. It can also be related to when a planet is scissored in between two malefics as well. But the strongest form is when there is a malefic in the 12th house and a malefic in the second house. But even though that can seem to create difficulty for the individual, if both of those planets are strong in creating more good in the horoscope than they are difficulty, the difficulty of the Papa Kartari yoga is hardly going to be felt. Okay, so you have to take things on a deeper level than just the simple yoga itself. Moon-Ketu conjunctions on a general level, generally when people have the moon conjuncting Ketu, the capacity for emotional depth is very deep. But that individual has to cope within the material world. So in order to cope within the material world, they have this tendency to suppress the emotions, to compartmentalize the emotions, because it's the only way to cope with their day-to-day existence. Imagine being out in your day-to-day, like out at work, and all of a sudden something touches your sensitivities and makes you want to cry. You're not going to break down in tears at work, right? So you learn these coping mechanisms in order to deal with the emotions. And those coping mechanisms teach you to compartmentalize your emotions, which after a certain amount of time, those emotions have to go somewhere. And so then the smallest little thing can come along and trigger those emotions, and those individuals will get into an emotional funk, so to speak, for several weeks because they've been placing their emotions in a certain place in order to cope with existence. So the key with Ketu moon conjunctions is to learn how to allow healthy flow of these emotions, right? How to relate to the emotions without becoming overly attached to them. Okay. Let's see what else we've got. Okay. I am going to do maybe one, two more questions, and then I'm going to have to pull my vanishing act, so to speak. How to understand if Rahu Ketu conjunct the Atma Karaka or Amacha Karaka? Well, I'm not sure if I understand your question because I think I see what you're asking, right? Um, Generally, Rahu connecting to the Atmakaraka can make it so the individual tends to identify with externals in their life, and then those externals disappear, leaving the individual confused about who they are. When you have Ketu connecting to the Atmakaraka, then whilst humility can be a strength, you find the individual may have some issues in relation to self-esteem and honoring their gifts, right? With the Atma Karaka, that deals with the skills. Rahu connected to the Atma Karaka, the individual may always want to seek advice from other people, may obsess about their friends, may obsess about the resources in their life as well. And with Ketu connecting with that, the individual may find little peace in friends, they may find little peace in the resources that they have, and have difficulty obtaining, good advice. But at the same time, a lot of that depends on the strength or weakness of the Atma Karaka or Atma Karaka. Okay. So that's going to do it. I'm going to wrap things up here, everybody. It's been good being here today. So just a reminder, the nakshatra course registration closes after Sunday. You can still register for the course. You can register by trimester, or you can register by paying in full. We're teaching a lot of things on the course. What are the nakshatras in general, which will generally make you think differently, because most people think the nakshatras are connected to the zodiac signs, but they're a completely independent circle, right? So we'll learn some things about that. We'll learn some new ways of looking at the nakshatras, new aspects and new facets of the nakshatras that many of you probably have never even known, as well as how to work with the nakshatras in connection to house cusps, learning the Shayanadi avastas, so many different things. But I'm closing registration after this weekend. So if you want to register, you can go to AuthenticAstrology.com, click on the courses link. You'll see a drop-down menu for the nakshatra course. When you go to register, on the payment page, enter the discount code, all uppercase letters, PRORATA, PRORATA, and you'll get a discount for the first 2 classes that you've missed. As well, all classes are recorded, so you can catch up with the class recording. In addition to that, 10% discount on all astrological services for a limited time only. If you go to the services page and book your consultation, enter the discount code, again, all uppercase letters, April, as in the month. You can get a 10% discount on your person-to-person consultation. Fees will increase on the 15th of April. So I'm kind of trying to give everybody a last go at getting in there at a discounted price. Okay, thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to everyone the next time around. Bye now.